So Margareta, please feel free to
Okay,
take the
thank you. Thank you so much. Margareta Karlsson is my name. I work at Statistics Sweden, and I've been working there for 22 years. Last 9 years, I've been in population and census statistics area. And I will, let's see here, there we go. I will talk a bit about register-based statistics in Sweden in general, but focus on the population and housing census based on registers mainly. Okay, and if there's any questions while I'm speaking, please feel free to ask. And I think Gloria said perhaps you can write them in the chat if you want to, I think. Let's start in 1990 when Sweden conducted a population and housing census, and how was the situation in that time. At that time, Sweden has a long history of using registers in statistics. But still, in 1990, we were not able to conduct a census fully based on registers. So at that time, we used a combined method. We used information from registers, and we also used questionnaires to the public. The questionnaires were sent to all persons aged 16 or older. And the frame that we used to reach these persons was the total population register, which is a register we had for many years. It includes all registered persons in Sweden. And if you are allowed to live and stay in Sweden, you have strong incentives to register. So the coverage of the population register is good. And when we conducted the census in 1990, the registered population in the register is also the target population for the population count. In this census, it was mandatory to respond, which is not so common in Sweden when it comes to surveys going to persons. But to businesses, it's more of like always the case almost. But in the censuses, it's been specific legislation saying that it's mandatory to participate and to respond to the questionnaire that we distributed to the persons. The work was not fully only done by Statistics Sweden. It was a cooperation between the statistical office and the municipalities, where we had local offices doing different things in the collection of data via the questionnaire. I said we had a combined method. We had both registers and register information and the questionnaire. So what kind of information did we have in registers? We have, for example, I'm not going to mention everything we had, but we had name. We have this personal identification number, the PIN, as it's called. It's a unique number for each person in Sweden, which is a great benefit to have in the register when you start using registers in different statistical surveys. We had information as address, parish, country of birth, and citizenship. We also had current activity status, occupation, and education. But the last three variables were not available for everyone, but for some. And the more we had in register, the less we needed to ask in the questionnaire. So all information that we have of good quality in a register and that may be used in the results in the statistics is something that you gain. You don't have to collect it. But what did we collect in the questionnaire? We collect information as household composition, which is an important thing in the census. It was not something that we were able to do using just the registry information at that time in Sweden. We also collected for the persons that we did not have activity status, occupation and education for in registers, we collected it also. And also for persons that perhaps we had this information in registers, it was pre-printed in the questionnaire, and if it was wrong at the time, the person who responded to the questionnaire were able to change it. We also collected working hours, how you get to work, for example, if you go by bike or car or bus or something. We also collected number of rooms in the dwelling that the person lives, or the family or the household. And we also collected things about the property, as, for example, year of construction. So this was the case in 1990. We had both registry information and questionnaire information. But the last census we conducted was in 2011. So what happened between 1990 with the combined method, and how did we get to 2011 when we actually had a fully register-based census? In this period, it was the register we already had in place in 1990 was continuously updated during this time. It was before also, and I'm talking about this time, so this period. So it was continuously updated. And some registers, it's on an annual regularity. Others are, as if we talk about the population register, it's continuously updated 5 times a week. And when I say updated, it's notification we receive from the tax agency, who is the data owner when it comes to the civil registration register. So when when you have registers in place and they are continuously updated, you are able to produce statistics, which is register-based, and you can produce statistics continuously also on an annual or monthly basis, for example. And that's what we did. When it comes to population, births, deaths, migration, properties, etc. It was continuously produced during this time. But after the 1990 census, it was a discussion in Sweden that's saying that, okay, the next census shall not be a combined method any longer. It shall be a register-based census, the next one. It was a decision from the government. So between 1990 and 2011, we didn't carry out any census in Sweden. We only had the statistics we were able to produce from registers in this area of demography and census. So we didn't do any census in a little bit more than 20 years. During this period, it was a law taken also on the creation of a dwelling register, and that law was taken in 2006. But before that, in 1995, Sweden also became a member of the European Union. And as a member of the European Union, there is legislation during this time taken between 2008 and 2010, I think, saying that member state of the Union shall conduct a census for the reference year 2011. So Sweden were obliged to do that in 2011, so we had to have everything in place to be able to do it register-based, since it was a decision in the country to not do it in a combined method anymore. So this new link that we needed to create to be able to do a fully register-based census was 2 things. It was first the creation of the dwelling register, as I mentioned, the law that made it possible to create this one. And in Sweden, it's the authority Lantmäteriet who are responsible for this register, and it includes all dwellings in the country, both houses with 1 dwelling or houses with more than 1 dwelling. And it also includes unoccupied and occupied dwellings. So all dwellings in the country shall be in this register. All dwellings in the register may be identified uniquely, and it's a combination between the dwelling number and the address. And the address, I guess, is easy to understand, but the dwelling number is a number that has a standard. If you have a house with only one dwelling, the address is unique for that dwelling. But if you have a house with more than one dwelling, you have to have the address in combination with the dwelling number, which is put on by according to a certain standard. It's on level 1, and it's the number first dwelling and then clockwise in a way. So the dwelling number in combination with the address makes unique identity of a certain dwelling, even if it's in a building with more than one dwelling. So when this register was in place, so okay, we have a register with all persons and we have a register with all dwellings. But okay, we need to combine these two. So the Swedish tax agency, which are the responsible agency when it comes to the civil registration, when the dwelling register were created, the tax agency added to the registration the person's dwelling number for persons living in multi-dwelling buildings. So this step was to combine the two register, let's say. So we could see in a house with more than one dwelling, you can see persons living they live in this dwelling and these live in that dwelling and one person live in this dwelling. So we can see who is living together or not. And that was the new link, let's say. This work was quite a lot of time consuming, and it took a lot of different participants. It was a cooperation between the Statistics Sweden, the municipalities, the Swedish tax agency, the agency Lantmäteriet, and the property owners and the public. So it was a huge process, but when this is in place, it's possible for us to create families, households, and also consensual union couples based on only register information, which was the new thing for Sweden. So what kind of challenges did we meet in this work then? I'm just going to put up some of them. When it comes to the dwelling register, sometimes there's a delay with new properties. So if a person wants to register at a dwelling in a new property, it sometimes is the dwelling is not in the dwelling register, so there may be a delay. Sometimes the dwellings are not put with the correct dwelling number, which makes produces problems, let's say. And we also have, I said before, that the address in combination with the dwelling number should be a unique code in, I didn't say, but it's in each municipality. And when this dwelling register were created, we noticed that some municipalities actually had the same address could be in two places. It was not, the addresses were not unique in the municipalities. So that was something that the municipalities actually had to change. It shall only be unique address in the municipalities. Otherwise, this system would not work. But then when it comes to registration of persons at the dwelling, what problems did we face? For example, persons may be registered at wrong dwelling, and for some it's the students, for example, who goes to the university. They usually, a lot of times, they are still registered at their parents' home, and they shall be registered where they study. So this is a problem that we face, and sometimes persons by mistake is registered in the neighbor's dwelling. So there is problems that we face. Also, we faced problems when the tax agency asked persons in which dwelling they lived so they can add this to the civil registration. Some persons didn't respond to this questionnaire and it was missing values. Over the time when people move, this is usually fixed, because when you move you have to say which new address and dwelling you are moving to. So it has changed and become better over time. So when we did the 2011 census and this work, we made an evaluation study of the quality of the register. How well does the register information reflect the real situation? So we saw that the large households are overestimated and the small are underestimated. And this may, for example, be that the students still are registered at the parents' home and not at where they study, for example. And try to just say that when it comes to the quality of the register, Statistics Sweden is in a quality group with other authorities trying to discuss the different tasks or problems we face and how we may solve them in a way also. So what do we...
Margareta, there are a few questions on the dwelling register. I don't know whether you want to take them now or you prefer to complete and then...
you can ask if you want to, or can you read them to me? Or
so on the dwelling register, I think I had the first question with, is it managed by the NSO? Is it a responsibility of the NSO, and is it the members of public that have to proactively update that register, or is it the NSO that has to go about updating it?
Yeah.
And then,
no, it's okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Continue.
Should
please.
I give you all the questions?
I take one. I can take one at a time then. Okay. The dwelling register is it's the authority Lantmäteriet. I don't know how to translate it to English, but it's not the statistical office that is responsible for the dwelling register. It's another authority, and it's the municipalities that shall keep this register updated with new buildings in the municipality and buildings that are put down. So it's not up to the persons or the NSO to do this. Okay?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. And then someone was asking, how do you update the dwelling list and addresses of occupants, which I think you more or less responded to. How often do you update the dwelling list and the address of occupants?
Okay. If you look at the address in the total population register, the address for the person, let's say my address is registered there now and I moved recently, then I notify the tax agency that I move. So this is done every time any person moves. But the tax agency sends this information to the NSO 5 times a week. I don't know, was that the answer to the question? Hello?
Sorry. I think that perfectly answers the question.
Okay.
Yes. Then the last one is a comment that the dwelling register sounds like it was important for the register-based census. Is that correct?
Yes. For us, it was the missing link, let's say, that we created to be able to do the fully register-based census. Yes, that was the link we were missing, the dwelling register in combination with persons being registered at their dwelling. So we combined dwellings with persons, let's say, the 2 different registers.
Okay.
So it was very important for us, yeah. Okay, shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I don't know.
But we'll ask later.
Okay, I think perhaps I talk a little bit too much. You can stop me whenever you want. So,
no problem.
So what things do we need to think about when we build up and maintain a register? Perhaps there's more things, of course there is, but okay, there's important to have legislation in place so you're able and allowed to build up this register and handle it the way you want to. It's also important that the statistical office have cooperation between data owners, because anyway in Sweden there's often there's another authority who are the data owners. And when you build up a register, I think it's good to know it takes time. You saw for us it took 20 years to go from a combined to registered based census, and Sweden is even we have a long history of the registers, and even that then it takes a time. So it takes time. That's good to know also. I think when it's also important to talk about the coverage in the registers. It's important that this is quite good. It's important to evaluate the quality and do different controls to see, and all the time continuously look at the quality and keep developing it. It's important that the register is updated continuously so you are able to use it regularly. Good procedures and systems in place. And if it's registers with personal information on persons, I think it's good if there's some kind of personal interest for the persons to actually notify the responsible authority when it's needed. So it's some kind of incentives for persons to actually do it. Okay, so after this was built up in Sweden, where did we end up Sweden today? I'm just going to show this picture. It's a basic picture about the Statistics Sweden system of registers. We have 3 different base registers. It's population, business, and real property. These are the base registers which defines the target population in each of these areas, and they may all be combined in a unique way. And this is the way it makes it possible to do a lot of statistics, and perhaps and for example the census. And so I continue a little bit. I think I've talked too much. This is a slide you may look at later on if you want to. It's just to show there's a lot of different statistical areas and registers to all these 3 registers. And this is some list of what kind of register-based statistics that's possible to produce when you have this kind of system in place. But even I said that in 1990 we were not able to produce all these statistics, but the more you have in register, even if you don't have everything, you can always gain on this because you don't have to collect this information. And information in registers may also be used in surveys if you don't want to collect, let's say, sex, age, things. If you have that in registers, it may be used from the register and not asked by the respondent. So just some short things about the population and housing census 2011, which we were able to actually conduct in a fully register-based way. Only information in registers were used. Most of the data we have in the registers are actually just to extract from the registers, but some information is not. We can use, by using a model, we may construct things of family, information on families, households, and consensual union couples. This is nothing that we can just extract from the registers, but we may use information in registers to create these. So I hurry up a little bit here. If you look at family and households, the first thing is in these cases that the persons shall be registered at the same dwelling, and we have the unique dwelling key to be able to do this. And then we look at the legal marital status, if you're married or registered partnerships with or whatever. And we also in the register have information on parent-child relationship, and we also have spouse relationship. We can see if you have a same-sex couple or different sexes, for example, to create families and households. And also something about the consensual union couples shortly. Let's say you have 2 persons with at least 1 child together. If we see that they are registered at the same dwelling, this is a consensual union couple with one child or more, I don't know, but at least one. But let's say you have two persons living as a couple without children. This is a little bit more challenging then. But then in that case, we cannot combine these persons via the child. We have another model. So these persons have to be, once again, registered at the same dwelling. They shall be 18 years old, at least, of different sex. The age different, less than 15 years. They may not be close relatives. And there shall only be one possible couple in the dwelling. Then we create a consensual union couple. And this is the model we tested. It gives the least net error compared to the real situation. So I think I perhaps talked a little bit too much. Okay, this is it. Thank you. Question for the questions.
Not at all. It's all very, very, very interesting.
Okay, perfect.
I have a few questions. I do have some questions on my side, but I'll first read out the
please.
Coming into the chat. So the first one, how do you include GPS coordinates for dwellings?
Yes. When it comes to it's geocoding, right? Is it the same? Sorry, Ian is geocoding, right? GPS.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, sorry. So for persons, I think about 95% of the persons have a GPS code, and for the dwellings, perhaps 90%.
Okay.
Give or take. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's an active, because I'm also trying to think, so if a new establishment is put in place, whoever is putting it in place needs to update the agency responsible for maintaining of that register, or how do you then keep up?
Yeah, okay. I don't know exactly. So, but it's between the municipality and the company building this dwelling. It's a cooperation to the responsible agency, and they put the GPS code in a way. I don't know in detail how this works, but it's some kind of cooperation there, because 90 to 95% of the dwellings and businesses and persons are, more likely 95, I would say, are GPS coded or have coordinates. So we are able to produce statistics at a very fine regional level, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know in detail exactly how it's done. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, no problem. That provides a good insight. I want 2 more questions.
Yeah, sure.
And colleagues, feel free to ask more questions in the chat, or even to speak through your microphones. So I'm interested in the point at which Start Sweden decided to transit from the traditional approach to the fully registered approach, because I imagine that from that leap, you must have done it with a lot of confidence. Is it a form of assessment that you did? And what kind of assessment are those assessment tools that you're able to share with us, if at all?
Well, I don't know if I understood exactly, but when the 1990 census was not a fully traditional. It was a combined method. We already had the population register, which is as a base in that census, but we had to collect, of course, a lot of information also concerning households and occupation and things like that. But even though you gain by having register information, all register information you have, you gain by this because you don't have to collect it. But even though in 1990, the Swedish government and the society thought perhaps when we sent, it was some discussions in the country that Big Brother sees you and things like that. It was some protests and it was an ongoing discussion. It was kind of costly, even though we had the information in the registers, but it would have been even more costly otherwise. So you gain by having registers. But it was it was decided that since we are kind of a registered country in a way, that this was the way to go. But as you saw, it took some time from 1990 until 2006 that it actually was a law saying that a dwelling register was okay by law to create, actually. I don't know if this was the answer to your question, sorry. But
Yeah. I'll just follow up shortly to ask, did you undertake an evaluation of all the registers at some point, or were you just
okay.
confident that they were in good shape for you to make the
Uh,
transition?
Yeah, the registers already used in 1990 had been used for quite a while. And when you use it, it's updated in, when you use register it, you notice what is not good and what is good. So we were confident that the population register, for example, had very good quality. But when we conducted the Census 2011, we made a smaller evaluation study of this new link that we created with the dwelling register and that persons were registered at the dwelling. So we sent out a questionnaire to a sample of persons, asking them if what kind of household size they lived in and what kind of household type they were living in. And then we compared this to the information that we created by using the registers. And when they were not the same, we contacted the persons and asked discussed what can be wrong or in this. So the evaluation study shows that the large households are overestimated when we use the registers, and the small households are underestimated. But the evaluation study is not used to adjust the figures. It's just used as a quality declaration of the census and the registers.
Okay.
Okay.
We have additional questions, Margareta.
Yeah,
The
sure.
first one is, how do you triangulate information from registers and other data sources that are not in the registers to have a complete picture of the census? How do you triangulate the information from registers and other data sources to have a complete picture of the census?
In the census, the last census that we did now in 2011, we only used information in registers. So, and if I show you, and all the registers are able to combine. We have unique identifications of persons, businesses, and real properties and dwellings. And so all these is combined. And in the Census 2011, we only used register-based information. But in the 1990 census, I didn't work then in this area, but I don't know exactly in detail, but we had the combined method here with registers and questionnaires, and the register information that we had was pre-printed on the questionnaire, and then the person responded to the other information. So when it came into Statistics Sweden or the municipalities at the local offices first, it was computerized, and so. But in the 2011 census, we only used registers, which is possible to uniquely combine.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. Another question is, what advice would you give to developing countries which do not have all dwellings and people registered? How could they optimize use of how could they optimize use of register-based population census steps? And what are the steps?
Oh, I think this is a little bit difficult for me to answer to, sorry, since I think anyway, if you want to start this way, I think that, okay, it's the population register is the foundation of a register-based census. So this is I would say this is the register to start with. And I think the best way of doing it is perhaps to conduct a census that makes the first edit of it, but then you have to have in place legislation and updating procedures and things like that to be able to update the register all the time. So it's of good actuality, what do you say? So I don't know if this is fully the answer, but I don't think I do have all the full answer. But I think the way is anyway to start with the population register, because this is a very important input for a register-based census, but also a very good input to be able to produce statistics on a regular basis. Now I don't know where I have this slide, but like this. If you have a population register, you may produce population figures on a regular basis, birth deaths, vital events, migration, and things like that. I think the population register is anyway the register to start with. But it's good cooperation with the different authorities and data owners. It's important also.
Yeah. I think thank you so much,
Okay, thank you.
Margareta. That is very insightful, and I think what I'm hearing is it's always good to begin, and a good point to begin from is the population register, but also ensuring that you have a basis for making sure that it's updated. And the point that you spoke to about coordination of stakeholders, very important. And I think that's what Philippe, who is also on this call and is joining for the second presentation, will be talking to us about. So that's a good link to his next presentation. Colleagues, I just want to ask whether there are any other comments or questions before we let Margareta go.
If you have, sorry.
There aren't any more in the chat. I just wanted to say, Margareta, it was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I just say, if you have my contact information, if you want to ask something more, and if I don't have the answer, I may find it somewhere by a colleague or something. So thanks for having me, and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
I leave now, okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for joining us. Okay,
bye.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, thank you for keeping with us. We will continue to the next presentation, and we have Philippe who is joining us. Philippe.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Philippe Gafishi. I work for Paris 21. I'm the regional program coordinator, specifically in charge of Africa. And I also lead the capacity development team at Paris 21. Before joining Paris 21, I was the Director General of the Statistics Office, and also working with other organizations dealing with statistical development. So thank you very much for inviting Paris 21 to contribute to this webinar. Very interesting webinar indeed. Administrative data and registers actually are the main source of data and statistics for development. So they really need to be strengthened, and this is sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I'm just going to mute all participants and to encourage everyone to keep themselves muted until so that it's a clear call. Thank you. Please proceed, Philip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was saying that administrative data and registers are actually the main data source for statistics development, and they really need to be strengthened and put in place. I think we have already seen what is being done in Sweden. It's incredibly very interesting, and you can see how countries actually can save a lot of funds, a lot of money, by not doing the normal census that are being used in many countries. But without going further on that, I was asked to talk on the National Strategy for Development of Statistics and its importance in strengthening the use of administrative data and registers for official statistics. First of all, I wanted actually to say that the NSDS, which is the National Strategy for the Development of Statistics, provide a vision for the development of statistics, which is consistent with the National Development Plans and Global Development Agenda Data Demand. This is actually where the National Development of Statistics comes to respond to the real demand from the policies and the strategies at national level, but also at global level. So to respond to this, we need an NSDS, which is actually a framework that provides a strategic planning for the statistical activities in the national statistical systems, but also a process that brings together all the relevant stakeholders in the national statistical systems, being users or producers. So the process actually helps to create a dialogue between the different producers and the users. So here you will see that the producers actually includes the people responsible for registers and the management information systems. So this is very important to note that the process should include all stakeholders. But at the end, you will also have a product, which is the NSDS document, which actually will provide the vision, the strategic objectives, and also create the annual action plans that are costed. The NSDS, as you can see on this slide, follows actually a life cycle, which I will not go into details, but you start from the preparation stage to the design stage, and then the implementation stage or deployment stage. And through all these stages, you engage with stakeholders to make sure that all the necessary data needs are taken into consideration, and all the stakeholders are aware of what is being planned for statistics. Why all of this? Why the whole process? As I said when just starting, is just because national statistical offices, national statistical systems are getting overwhelmed with data demand because of the national strategy, the national development strategies that have frameworks of monitoring and evaluation frameworks that requires a lot of data, and the national statistics offices and the NSS do not have the capacity to do this. But when you look around, you can see that most of the data are available, but they are available in a way that maybe they are incomplete or they are outdated, and some of them are not available at all. But when you assess further, you see that administrative data sources are the key sources for this data, but they are not organized. So when they are not organized, it's very difficult to derive any quality indicator to respond to the data demand that I mentioned. Therefore, there is a need to harmonize, to modernize, to innovate, to digitalize these systems, the data, administrative data sources, the registers we're talking about in the first presentation. If we don't work on this, we don't innovate the way of getting the data, registering the data, digitalize the system, it will be very difficult to respond to the data demand. So this needs a huge mobilization of resources, being financial resources or even human resources. Just an example of the SDGs alone, without talking about the country national development plans data requirements, you can see that we actually have 232 unique indicators that countries have to respond to or to provide data for this, to inform these indicators. So it's already a huge demand where countries don't have capacity. So there is a need through the NSDS process planning, there is a need to identify which indicators are a priority for the country and how countries can produce these indicators, and try to see how the indicators which are in provided in the SDGs are not repeated differently in in national development plans. So there should be a kind of harmonization to see that, to check whether when you provide data for the NDP, the national development plans, it will also inform some of the indicators of the SDGs. Now, how can the NSDS help strengthening the production and the use of administrative data? When I was talking about the process, we actually need in countries a clear, strong political leadership support, which gives an explicit recognition of statistics in the national development strategies and the use of the administrative data, the registers, instead of focusing on very costly censuses and surveys. So if countries have this strong understanding from political leaders, then it's already a very good start. Also, the process, as I said, allows to create a proper dialogue with key data producers and users, being the government, institutions, the private sector, civil society organizations, and so forth and so forth. If you have this dialogue in place, the people managing the registers, we understand that, oh, this is not just recording information, but this information will be used for development. So they will take care of this, and the strengthening the capacity development, the capacity strengthening of the national statistical system will not be focused only on the NSO, but will be actually extended to the all national statistical system stakeholders to get this information produced and used. Furthermore, it creates also a common understanding of what should be produced in a national statistical system. Because the strategy, after assessing the NSS, then you know what is priority and how you deal with these priorities. Also, because the NSS stakeholders have been involved in the whole process, there is a high commitment to implement the strategy, because there is no need to have a very good strategy, a very good document written and not implemented. So that's waste of time, waste of resources. And when it is implemented, actually, it allows a very good coordination of the national statistical system. It creates governance strategies, governance arrangement within the NSS. It creates also the common harmonization of methodologies to be used, the standards to be used. If you want to register information, population information in the registers or business registers, you have to have the same definition of the variables you are using. Otherwise, it will be a problem to use it later if you are using different metadata or different methodologies. When the process is well done and you have the political support, it is now easier to mobilize domestic funding. You can see in developing countries, I have been working in developing countries most of my career. The big issue is that statistics are mainly funded by external donors. And when these donors or this support from donors decreases, it affects completely the production of data, the quality, and so on. So the process allows to gain the political support and to mobilize easily domestic funding, and therefore enhance the coordination of support from the partners. Because sometimes you have support from donors, from development partners, but they are not they are not coordinated, and you can see that there are some duplications in some activities, and then there is a kind of waste of resources. Now, when you have this in place, you need to develop the capacity of the NSS. Paris 21 has embarked in developing the capacity development 4.0 to see how the capacity development can actually go beyond just training, but be more inclusive by looking at the individual capacity development needs, the organizational capacity development needs, and the systemic capacity needs. And this is only the way you can achieve your capacity development in the statistical system or in any other organization, by the way, by looking what are the resources needed, what are the skills that are needed and knowledge, what kind of management can optimize the production of statistics, and which kind of support you need from the political authorities, and what are the incentives you need to encourage the people working in the system. So this should not be something that is only focusing on NSO. I want to emphasize on this. It has to be for the national statistical systems, moving away from the traditional NSS, going beyond and look at the data ecosystem. And here you will find the registers, you will find the management information systems, you will find the non-traditional data sources like the citizen-generated data. And all this will help actually to strengthen, to coordinate the production of statistics and the use of the statistics for the country development. So from this, I think I can just highlight the challenges that many countries face when developing or implementing the NSDS, understanding that this is the national statistical system, is not only the NSO. The key challenges that I selected here are the lack of high-level political support to statistical development agenda. So when you don't have the support from the political authorities, you will never get statistics used in the development planning. And then why should you produce the statistics then if they are not asked? So the production should be user driven. But there is also another level of leadership weakness. This is at the level of the coordination of the national statistical system. When you have a weak coordination leadership at the NSO, there is a problem. So there will be a problem to define the vision. There will be a problem to create dialogue fora between stakeholders. There will be a problem to communicate with stakeholders. There will not be accountability in the system, and then all this will not facilitate the implementation of the NSDS. But there is also an important thing. This is the legislation. And here I will actually maybe refer to the presentation, the first presentation of Margaret. If you don't have the legislation in place, you will have serious problem in exchanging information, because there is an issue here of privacy. So legislation should be in place and should be very clear to protect the privacy of individual information. And the legislation also will enhance the coordination of the NSS. How do you exchange the data? How do you protect the individual information used only for statistical purposes? The other issue is the capacity. In developing countries, really, there is a high level of, a very big lack of capacity in terms of human resources, in numbers, but also in technical skills and knowledge to manage all this information, but also the statistical infrastructure. From the previous presentation, having dwellings and people registered and updated, it requires a high statistical infrastructure in place. If you don't have it, it will be very difficult actually to move from the census, the normal traditional census method, to the registers-based census. So you need to have this infrastructure in place. The last but not least is the adequate financing, paying domestic financing as well as external support. We need countries to have adequate domestic financing first, but also a great coordination of external support to statistical development. If this is not in place, you can have all the legislation in place, but if you don't have financing, you don't have the coordination of the resources you are getting, it will also be a huge problem to get where your NSDS is pointing to your vision. Yeah, I can stop here, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any question.
Philip, thank you. Thank you very much again for yet another insightful presentation. And I was listening to you touching on a lot of the issues that have been coming up during our roundtable series discussions, where countries have been sharing experiences about how access to administrative data or register data by NSOs. And in some countries, we've had experiences like legislation exists, but just because it exists does not mean you're able to actualize that legislation. The other thing that I've experienced through my own personal engagement with Pacific Island countries is how sometimes registers are taken to be a very administrative function and not included in the broader scope of statistical development in some countries. And that de-link means that they can be good and they can be of good quality, but in some places they might never feature as a key source of official statistics. One point that you brought across and which I'd like to link to a question is you talk about resource mobilization. And I wanted to find out whether there are countries at all that you may be aware that have been able to mobilize resources from, let's say, their register owned systems. You understand, like not just for the NSO, but if I'm a civil registry organization and I'm supporting the NSDS and the entire NSS, is there scope for me as an organization to be supported funding wise? Do you have experiences of that? We also have two other questions which I will ask.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe just a comment on the legislation. Having a legislation doesn't mean that everything's done. The legislation should be implemented, and this links actually to the leadership. What I was talking about. The statistics offices need to go out of the box, go towards other data sources, stakeholders, discuss with them, work with them, show the importance of having the legislation, but also implementing the legislation, and show actually what will be the benefits of somebody managing a register for administrative purposes. You are asking him or her to give you the data. What interest do he or his institution has to share the data? So if themselves can use the information they are giving you, because you get the administrative information that you transform into indicators that themselves will use. So I think the dialogue is extremely important in this. The registration is fine, it should be there, but then the dialogue to implement the registration is key. For the financing, I have one example from Tunisia. Tunisia have a CRVS system, and they have started computerizing their system, but they are still using two parallel systems. And moving to that, they are actually attracting more funding from the government, but also from other donors. The other example is Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde has moved to a biometric ID with a unique identification number, whereby they are linking all the CRVS information to that number. And the government has really invested in that. And you can also see that the statistics system actually is taking it seriously and attracting funding through the NSS, the NSDS, to support the CRVS system. I mean, digitalize the system. So it's possible. I have seen in Rwanda, where I'm coming from as well, the statistics office works with the ID authority institution, and also they link the system to the local authorities, which deals with the civil registration at the local communities, as well as the CRVS. I mean the civil registration and the vital statistics as well. So you can see how the statistics actually can link several institutions together to produce a common database, and then produce necessary needed indicators. So from there you will attract government funding, because they see the importance of having such a system. And when it is planned through the NSDS, then the NSDS will be funded as a whole plan. So there is now a room to have a coordinated funding actually of the admin data through the NSDS. I'm not sure if I responded to the question. Yeah, thank you.
I think you did respond well. And 2 comments also related to that is, do you have examples of countries which have developed an effective NSDS that worked well with partners, etc., to have and made a real difference? And then, the other question was about typical barriers for an effective NSDS and any advice that you will give to developing countries.
Yeah, the NSDS, the first NSDS is always difficult to implement, and even to develop itself. So maybe I will combine with the last question. When you are developing the first NSDS, from experience, you have to be realistic. You have to focus on the key few priorities, which will be probably looking at the legislation and looking at the institutional and the governance arrangement, and probably the minimum requirement to build the capacity. Then, once you develop this and you implement it, there will be surely high demand in terms of data production. Then you can move to more data production planning. And the countries that are implementing more or less easily their NSDSs are the countries that are doing their third NSDS now. And the example is Uganda, is Senegal, Kenya as well, Rwanda. I'm just giving examples for Africa, but Philippines also has developed very, very good statistic NSDS, and I think they are on their 4th one. And you can see how they have actually gone far in mobilizing funds and increasing the coverage of data production. So the other example, there are some countries that have put in place what they call Statistical National Development Fund, which is funded by the government. And they have introduced what they call statistics tax, imposed on import of some products, and the government collect the money and put the money into the statistics fund. And then the national statistical system will use these funds to conduct their statistical projects. So these are some examples that actually work in some countries. but the successfulness of the NSDS will depend on the country context. So you have to take that in consideration.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And would I be correct to say that Paris 21 provides support in this area?
Yes, indeed. We support countries to develop their NSDS. We support also in terms of training, capacity development. We are now developing some training programs in leadership. We have been actually conducting leadership training and also management training for middle managers at the NSOs and NSS. And we are also working, we support countries actually also to mobilize funds for their systems. So that's the area that we work on as well.
Thank you, Philip. I was hoping we have your contact details at the end of the slide so that we can share them with participants who are interested. But either way, I think when we upload the presentations on the website, we will make sure that information is available.
Yes, please. I will send. Oh, you do have my contact, so please
Yes.
Go ahead and add it on the slides or any contact list.
Sure. Colleagues, do we have any other comments from participants? And if not, I think I will just really thank you, Philippe, for joining us. I know it's very late on your side, so we will release you to go and sleep. And thank you for making time to speak to the Pacific this morning. We really appreciate.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Thank you, Jan.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. So I'll take over now. I've got this slide. So in the interests of time, I'll probably skip through some of my slides and just focus on a summary of the Nordic countries' approaches, timelines and lessons, because I think it goes quite well with Margaretta's earlier presentation. And the other material I can do at another webinar maybe. As with other speakers, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them either orally or in the chat, and Gloria or someone else will ask them to me. So I'll just skip over these slides and I'll cover those later. So this is just an overview of the Nordic countries' experience in developing registered-based censuses. I think there's some interesting lessons here. So the Nordic countries, I'm talking here about Norway, Finland, Sweden and Denmark in particular, have a long tradition of using administrative registers in the production of official statistics, and I'll show you a timeline in a minute. So when all of these administrative registers in place, the first step wasn't developing a register-based census. It was first producing statistics on the different subject areas depending on the registers available, so population statistics, income statistics. And then only when they had been developed and the NSO had learned about the quality of the data and had been able to work with the register owners to improve the data, only after a period of testing and improvement then was the register data used within the censuses. So that process, we've heard about that before. So a system of register-based information has been developed in all of the Nordic countries. And in these countries, all statistics registers, in principle, are seen as part of a single system, kind of joined together, not as single registers in their own right. So that has positive implications for the quality of the registers, the ability to link between registers, etc., making sure that data is collected maybe only once and not duplicated, etc. And as we've heard before, and as Margareta said earlier, the cornerstone in these countries are the base registers, population, addresses or dwellings, and businesses. And that enables you to keep track of people, where they live, where they work, etc. and that the registers can be linked. And something else that I think that's worth noting is that different outputs, different subject matter statistics outputs might be based on the same data sources. So information in the population register, for instance, might underpin a wide range of social statistics outputs. Just in terms of the timeline, a few slides here on the timeline. Denmark was the very first country in the world to conduct a totally register-based census, and that was in 1981. And then Finland followed fairly shortly afterwards in 1990. Norway and Sweden were making some use of registers from 1980 onwards, as we heard for Sweden from Margareta, but they held their first register-based censuses in 2011. So that was, 30 years, 30 years after Denmark, for instance. And the main difference between these countries that explains the difference in the timescale is that Denmark and Finland had dwelling registers in place by 1980, while the dwelling register in Norway was established in 2001. And I think we heard from Sweden, the legislation for dwelling register was passed in 2006, and it was only really fully operational by 2008. And I think Margareta said earlier that the dwelling register was like the missing link to enable them to move to a fully registered-based census. So in the early to mid-60s, central population registers were set up in all of the Nordic countries, and they each had a unique identification number. Then various other administrative registers were set up, and I'll show you a slide in a minute that shows that. Admin data, registered data for use in statistics started in the early 1970s, and as we've said before, it was used initially for certain subject matters, often starting with population statistics, income statistics and employment statistics, because those were the ones that were most readily available from the population register or from the tax authorities. Then new register-based statistics were developed in each of these countries, and the time taken from developing the administrative registers to when they were satisfactory for use in the census, well, that varied from subject matter to subject matter, and also varied between countries. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach here. It's very country context. I think that's something that's worth saying. So this table shows for the four countries, Denmark, Finland, Norway and Sweden, the different registers and when they were established and when they were first used in the census. So I'm just going to sort of highlight a few things here. So in Denmark, the population register was established in 1968, the business register in 1975, and the dwellings register in 1977. And the first registered-based census was able to be carried out in 1981. So that was fairly shortly after 12, 13 years after the establishment of the population register. Finland, the population register was established about the same time as in Denmark. The business register is also in 1975 and the dwelling register in 1980. And they were able to run a totally registered-based census for the first time in 1990. I think because the dwelling register was only available in 1980, was first used for production of statistics in 1985. The 1990 was the first time they could run a fully registered-based census. In Norway, the population registers and business registers were established in 1964 and 65. So the business register was available earlier in Norway than in either Denmark or Finland, but the dwelling register was only available in 2001, and the first registered-based census was not until 2011. And finally, for Sweden, we had the population registers and business registers in the 1960s again, but the dwelling register was not until 2008, and that meant that their first fully registered census was in 2011. So I think this difference in the timeline illustrates the importance of the dwelling register to be able to run a fully registered based census. So that's a sort of run through of some of the timelines. Just something else about public attitudes. I think that's also important. So in Finland and Denmark, there was always good support for and trust in the National Statistics Office. In Norway, there was a big public debate in the 1970s about data privacy, etc., which is partly why they moved away from a more traditional census. But there were concerns about the use of registers, but there is now acceptance of that. And then, as we heard from Margareta, there was concerns about Big Brother with the census in the 1970s, but also an ongoing concern about the use of registers for statistical purposes. But there's been acceptance of that since the early 2000s, which enabled the government to put through the legislation and for the NSO to proceed with the register-based censuses. But I think one thing that's striking in all of the Nordic countries, a key approach has been to have an open discussion and debate, to explain the rationale for using register-based data, and also to explain the benefits of use of registers, and to emphasise the protections that are in place around data protection, and that individuals' data is protected and secure. So, last slide that I should talk to for now. What does this kind of mean for Pacific Island countries, this experience from the Nordic countries? Well, and from others, there are advantages and disadvantages of the greater use of registers of administered data. Much lower costs, but there's a need for investment up front. So Pacific Island countries will need to assess your own situation and the extent to which you want to and are ready to make this journey. I've skipped over the UN prerequisites, but there are things that we've heard from others, the need for statistical legislation, access to individual registered data, etc. And again, you want to assess your country's situation against those prerequisites and preconditions to work out what priorities are for an action plan. The importance of the creation of statistical registers for population, businesses and addresses, and then the need to, the approach to gradually develop and add in extra register sources over time. And as I think we've emphasised before, and as Margareta and others have told us, this is a lengthy process. You can see that some of the Nordic countries took 46 years from the establishment of their central population register to moving to a fully registered-based census. Other countries were able to do this faster, but there were benefits along the way from the ability to produce, say, annual population statistics or annual migration data based on registers. So there are benefits long in advance of moving to a fully registered-based census. And I think in the interests of time, I'll stop there and just open that up for questions.
Thank you, Ian. And again, I think I just like your summary statement where you say it certainly is a lot of time and effort, but beginning the journey has benefits. I think with the advantages we have with internet technology now, it makes us better able to leapfrog and probably do things faster than it was done historically.
That's certainly true. The IT technology nowadays means that those changes can be done much faster. Austria, I think I've said before in another webinar, moved from a traditional census in 2001 to a fully registered based census in 2011, that is quite fast.
Right. So, colleagues, are there any questions from the floor on this last presentation? Any comments or questions, that is? We will just say thank you very much again for joining us. As you would have noted, we are almost coming to the end of this series. We have one more webinar on the 16th where we will hear from New Zealand and the UK. And then our last session will be on the 30th of September where we'll conclude on this series. We hope that you have learned and are benefiting from the information being shared here. And feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to engage in any additional way